Let me tell you about the summer I learned that love can be the most expensive lie you'll ever buy. My name is Vivienne Hartwell, and before everything fell apart, I was Atlanta royalty. Not the kind born into it, no, I built my empire from the ground up. Hartwell Cosmetics started in my grandmother's kitchen in Sweet Auburn and grew into a $100 million enterprise with flagship stores on Peachtree Street and distribution across the South. At 42, I had everything: a mansion in Buckhead, a penthouse downtown, cars, jewelry, respect, power. Everything except someone to share it with. That's how they get you, isn't it? When you have everything else, loneliness becomes the crack in your armor, the vulnerability they can exploit. I met Marcus Whitfield at a charity gala at the High Museum. He was new to Atlanta, or so he said, recently relocated from Charleston for business opportunities. Tall, devastatingly handsome, with that southern charm that feels like warm honey. Dark eyes that seem to see right through you. A smile that made you forget to breathe. He approached me by the Monet exhibit, champagne in hand, and said something clever about how the painting couldn't compare to the beauty standing in front of it. I know, such an obvious line. But when you've spent 20 years building a business, when men are usually either intimidated by your success or trying to use you for it, having someone look at you like you're just a woman worth pursuing, it does something to you. We talked for 3 hours that night. He told me about his work in private equity, always vague about the details, which should have been my first red flag. But he asked about my business with genuine interest, or what seemed like genuine interest. He wanted to know about my journey, my struggles, my triumphs. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. By the end of the night, he had my number. By the end of the week, we'd had dinner 3 times. By the end of the month, I was falling. God, I was falling so hard. Marcus was intoxicating. He'd show up at my office with lunch from Busy Bee Cafe, knowing I'd been working too hard to eat. He'd planned surprise weekend trips to Savannah, to the mountains, to anywhere I could escape the pressure of running my empire. He listened. He laughed at my jokes. He held me like I was something precious. And the physical connection? It was fire. Pure, consuming fire. I remember the first time we made love in my Buckhead mansion, rain hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He'd cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and wine, and we'd ended up on the living room floor, clothes scattered across the marble, the city lights of Atlanta twinkling below us like we were on top of the world. His hands on my skin, his mouth tracing the curve of my neck, whispering how beautiful I was, how he'd never met anyone like me. The way he moved with me, patient and passionate, making me feel desired in a way I'd forgotten was possible. We made love for hours that night, exploring each other, learning each other's bodies, and when I finally fell asleep in his arms, I remember thinking, this is it. This is what I've been missing. 6 months into our relationship, he proposed. We were at Piedmont Park during the fall, leaves golden and crimson around us, and he got down on one knee with a ring that was modest by my standards, but perfect in its sincerity. Or what I thought was sincerity. Vivienne, he said, those dark eyes locked on mine, you're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I was in love. Dizzy, stupid, reckless love. We married 3 months later in a ceremony at the St. Regis. Small, intimate, just close friends and family. My secretary, Shanice Davis, helped plan everything. She'd been with me for 5 years, efficient and loyal, always anticipating my needs before I voiced them. A beautiful woman in her late 20s with golden skin and sharp cheekbones, always impeccably dressed. I remember her helping me into my wedding dress, her hands gentle as she fastened the buttons. You look so happy, Miss Vivienne, she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I am, I told her. I really am. She smiled. That's all that matters. If only I'd seen what was behind that smile. The first few months of marriage were blissful. Marcus moved into the Buckhead mansion, though he kept his downtown apartment for business purposes. He became more involved in my company, offering suggestions, asking questions. I gave him access to some of the financial accounts. Not everything. I'm not a complete fool, but enough to help manage household expenses, to feel like a true partner in our life together. He was affectionate, attentive, We'd make love in the mornings before work, his body warm against mine in the California king bed, sunlight streaming through the windows. Sometimes quick and urgent, both of us needing each other before the day began. Other times slow and languid, taking our time, learning new ways to pleasure each other. I remember one morning in particular, after a company milestone we'd celebrated the night before. I woke to find him watching me sleep, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "What?" I asked, smiling. "Just memorizing this moment," he said. "You're so beautiful when you're at peace." Then he kissed me, deep and slow, his hands sliding down my body, relearning curves he'd mapped 100 times before. We made love as the city woke up around us, losing ourselves in each other, and afterward lying tangled in expensive sheets. I thought, I am the luckiest woman alive. I was such a fool. The cracks started small, money disappearing from not huge amounts, but enough that I noticed. Marcus explained them away. Investments, business opportunities, things that would pay off soon. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Then there were the late-night calls he'd take in another room, his voice low and secretive. "Business," he'd say when I asked. "Boring stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." The trips downtown that became more frequent. Meeting with investors, he'd explain. And Shanice, my loyal secretary, started acting different, distracted, secretive. She'd close her laptop quickly when I approached. She'd take personal calls in hushed tones. Once I caught her and Marcus in the hallway outside my office, their heads close together, and when they saw me, they jumped apart like teenagers caught making out. "Just discussing some scheduling issues," Marcus said smoothly. "For the charity benefit next month," Shanice added quickly. I nodded, smiled, told myself I was being paranoid. Successful women in Atlanta know that jealousy and suspicion are luxuries we can't afford. You have to trust your people. You have to trust your husband. But something in my gut, that instinct that had built my empire, started screaming. I hired a private investigator. His name was Calvin, a retired Atlanta PD detective who came highly recommended. I felt guilty doing it, like I was betraying Marcus, but I needed to know. I needed to silence that screaming voice or confirm it. 3 weeks later, Calvin came to my office with a manila folder that would destroy my entire world. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, his voice gentle in that way people use when they're about to deliver devastating news. "I'm sorry to tell you this." The photos spilled across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. Marcus and Shanice at a restaurant in Virginia Highland, holding hands. Marcus and Shanice leaving his downtown apartment together, her clothes from the night before. Marcus and Shanice at a jewelry store in Lenox Square, looking at rings, engagement rings. But the worst, the absolute worst, were the financial records Calvin had obtained. Bank accounts in Marcus's name filled with money from my company. Transfers I'd never authorized, using the access I'd given him. Invoices for services never rendered. Payments to shell companies that didn't exist. $2 million. Gone. Siphoned away over 18 months while Marcus whispered sweet nothings in my ear and made love to me like I was his entire world. "There's more," Calvin said quietly. He pulled out another document. Marcus Whitfield isn't his real name. He's Marcus Webb, and he has a history. Twice before, he's married wealthy women, gained access to their finances, and disappeared. Both women filed charges, but he's good at covering his tracks. Changes identities, moves cities. I stared at the photos, at the man I'd married, at the woman I'd trusted, and something inside me went cold. Not hot with anger, that would come later. This was ice. Pure, crystalline ice spreading through my veins. "How deep does this go?" I asked. Calvin hesitated. "Based on what I've uncovered, they're planning to drain your business accounts and disappear. There's evidence of them planning a life together in Miami. Flight reservations, a condo lease. They're waiting for one more big transfer to clear. Looks like it's scheduled for next week, and then they're gone." I looked at him. "Next week?" "Friday," he confirmed. "The transfer is set for Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, they'll be on a plane to Miami with about $5 million of your money." I sat in my office for a long time after Calvin left. The sun set over Atlanta, the city lights coming on one by one, and I felt nothing. Numb, empty, betrayed on a level I didn't know was possible. The man I loved, the man I'd given myself to, body and soul, was a con artist. And the woman I'd trusted, who I'd promoted, who I'd treated like family, was his accomplice, his lover, his partner in destroying me. But here's the thing about building $100 million empire. You don't do it by being soft. You don't do it by letting people walk all over you. You do it by being smart, strategic, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. And I was about to be very, very ruthless. I went home that night and acted normal. I greeted Marcus with a kiss, asked about his day, made dinner. We ate together at the Marble Island in our gourmet kitchen, talking about nothing, and then we went upstairs. He wanted to make love. Of course he did. That had always been part of his weapon against me, keeping me satisfied, keeping me distracted, keeping me in love. I let him undress me slowly, his hands moving over my body with familiar confidence. I let him lay me down on our bed, let him kiss his way down my stomach, let him pleasure me with his mouth until I was gasping his name. I let him enter me, moving together in the darkness, his breathing heavy in my ear as he told me he loved me, that I was beautiful, that he'd never leave me. I let him believe I believed him. Afterward, he fell asleep quickly, satisfied, secure in his deception. I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, planning. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mitchell Cameron, the best in Atlanta. I explained everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said, "Vivienne, you have options. We can report this to the police, freeze the accounts, start legal proceedings." "No," I interrupted. "If we do that, they'll know I'm onto the plan. They'll run with whatever's in their reach. I want everything back, and I want them destroyed." Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "What did you have in mind?" I told him. He laughed, a dark, appreciative laugh. "You're diabolical." "I'm practical," I corrected, "and I'm done being the victim." That week, I played the perfect wife, affectionate, trusting, completely unaware. I watched Marcus move through my house, through my life, and I saw him clearly for the first time. The calculated touches, the rehearsed endearments, the way his eyes would go cold when he thought I wasn't looking. At the office, I watched Shanice with new clarity, the smug little smiles, the way she'd linger near my desk, probably wondering how much longer she'd have to play secretary before she could run off with my husband and my money. Friday morning arrived, the day of the big transfer. The day all my accounts would be emptied and Marcus and Shanice would disappear to their new life in Miami. Except that's not what happened. What happened was this. Thursday night, working with Mitchell and Calvin, I'd moved every dollar from the vulnerable accounts into new secured accounts that Marcus couldn't access. Then I'd created shell accounts that looked identical to my real accounts, same names, same interface, everything, but filled with fake money, digital illusions. Friday morning, the transfer went through. On Marcus's end, on the accounts he could access, it looked like $5 million had just landed. On my end, nothing had actually moved. His $5 million was vapor, fantasy, a mirage. I watched from my office as Shanice checked her phone. They were clearly monitoring the transfer and watched her face light up. She looked at me through my office window and smiled, actually smiled. The audacity. Marcus called me at noon. "Hey, baby, how's your day going?" "Oh, busy, the usual." "Listen, something's come up. Business emergency. I need to fly to Miami tonight. Might be gone for the weekend. You okay with that?" "Of course," I said sweetly. "You do what you need to do." I could hear the relief in his voice. "You're the best, Viv. I love you." "I know you do," I said. I watched on the security cameras as Shanice left early, citing a family emergency. I watched her practically skip to her car, probably thinking about the life she was about to start with my husband and my money. I gave them exactly 3 hours, long enough for them to think they'd gotten away with it, long enough for them to get to the airport, probably celebrating, probably already spending my money in their heads. That's when the FBI showed up at Hartsfield-Jackson. You see, while I'd been playing the oblivious wife, Mitchell had been building an airtight case. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, embezzlement. Using Marcus's real identity, Marcus Webb, and his history of similar cons, we had everything documented, notarized, and gift-wrapped for federal prosecutors. The FBI had been watching them all week, building their own case, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment was when Marcus and Shanice, with their packed bags and fake smiles, tried to board a plane to Miami with what they thought was $5 million of my money in offshore accounts. I wasn't there, but Calvin was. He sent me photos. Marcus in handcuffs, his face shocked and pale. Shanice crying, mascara running down her cheeks, looking nothing like the confident woman who'd smiled at me that morning. The texts Marcus sent from his phone before they confiscated it would have been funny if the whole thing wasn't so pathetic. Vivienne, please, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. I love you, please. I deleted them without responding. The trial was 6 months later. I testified, calm and composed in a Chanel suit, telling the jury exactly how I'd been manipulated, seduced, and stolen from, how they'd worked together to gain my trust and drain my accounts, how Marcus had used intimacy as a weapon, making me vulnerable, making me love him so I'd give him access to everything I'd built. His lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-wife. The prosecutor, a brilliant woman named Kenya, destroyed that narrative in minutes. Mrs. Hartwell didn't create the evidence, Kenya said. She simply uncovered it. The defendant created his own evidence through his actions. The false identity, the hidden accounts, the documented history of identical crimes in 2 other states, the texts between him and Ms. Davis planning their escape. Mrs. Hartwell's only crime was trusting her husband. The defendant's crime was exploiting that trust in a calculated, premeditated scheme to steal millions. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marcus got 15 years in federal prison. Shanice got 8. They'll both be eligible for parole, but with federal sentencing guidelines, they'll serve most of it. I got every penny back, plus damages. The fake accounts I'd created meant that nothing was actually lost. It was attempted theft, but not successful theft. The court awarded me additional compensation for emotional distress and punitive damages. But more than the money, I got something else, my power back. I'm sitting in my office now, looking out at Atlanta, this city that's seen me rise and nearly fall and rise again. Hartwell Cosmetics is stronger than ever. I hired a new secretary, a lovely older woman named Patricia, who's been a godsend. I sold the Buckhead mansion, too many ghosts, and bought a new penthouse in Midtown with views that make me feel like I'm flying. I'm not dating, maybe someday, but not now. Right now, I'm focused on what I almost lost: myself, business, my strength, my clarity. People ask if I regret trusting Marcus, if I blame myself for not seeing through him sooner. The answer is complicated. Yes, I wish I'd been more careful. Yes, I wish I'd trusted my instincts sooner. But I refuse to let this experience make me hard and closed off. I refuse to let Marcus Webb steal my ability to trust, to love, to hope. He took my money, but I took it back. He took my faith in people, but I'm rebuilding it. He took 18 months of my life, but I have decades ahead. And the best part? Every year on the anniversary of his conviction, I receive a financial report showing exactly how much my company has grown. Last year, we broke $200 million in revenue. This year, we're on track for $300 million. While Marcus sits in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, counting down 15 years, I'm building an empire that will outlast both of us. While Shanice serves her time, I'm mentoring young women in Atlanta, teaching them about business, about trusting their instincts, about not letting anyone, especially not a charming man with dark eyes and empty promises, make them doubt their own power. I won. Not because I got revenge, though I won't lie, watching him get sentenced felt pretty damn good, but because I refused to let this destroy me. I refused to become bitter, paranoid, closed off. I took the hit, absorbed it, learned from it, and came back stronger. My grandmother used to say, "Baby, the only difference between a victim and a survivor is what you do after the fall." She built her cosmetics business in her kitchen with $5 and a dream. She taught me that power isn't about never falling down, it's about always getting back up. So I got back up, and I'm still standing. Atlanta nights are beautiful from my new penthouse. The city sparkles below me, full of possibility, full of danger, full of life. I pour myself a glass of wine, a Bordeaux that costs more than Marcus ever actually made in an honest day's work, and I toast to the city that shaped me. To Atlanta, the city that builds you up and burns you down and teaches you who you really are. To Betrayal, the teacher you never wanted but desperately needed. To Justice, slow, methodical, and absolutely worth the wait. And to me, Vivienne Hartwell, CEO, survivor, and no longer anybody's fool, I am expensive to love and impossible to deceive, and I earned every bit of both.